Alright gamers, let's go over what is the best class for you in the brand new Guild Wars Reforged, because I know there's a lot of new players hopping in for the very first time and they want to start off with the role-playing with the campaign. However, we'll also talk a little bit about PvP as well. If you are interested in doing PvP, there are going to be skills that you will have to unlock, but your character, in terms of like your weapon power, you can just generate your weapons. It doesn't really matter too much. However, in terms of like the best like armors and stuff, your armor will be exactly the same in terms of like the stats on it, but there will be extra unlocks that you can grind out in PvP. But most people will probably be starting off with a brand new character and they want to level up, so I'm going to focus in on both aspects of it. But because there's a lot of people that are downloading the brand new Guild Wars Reforged here, you will have access to all of the classes in the game. The Eye of the North expansion is just more additional PvE content. So don't worry if you were interested in just PvP, you don't even need that. In fact, don't even buy that until you experience the game for the very first time. So the important thing to mention is there are 3 campaigns that you can play. These are all full campaigns. Now, Prophecies only allows you to play 5 classes. In Factions, you have access to 7 classes, but the first 5 are available for 2 of the other campaigns. Basically, there's the base, like, core game, which is Prophecies. Factions is an entire campaign. It is brand new, but it does allow you to have access to the Assassin and the Ritualist. And then with Nightfall, you have access to the Paragon and Dervish. So those are the differences between the different campaigns, if you're wondering like, what's the difference. There is a completely new story. I would say, to be honest, start off with the very first one. Unless there's a class that you really are like, wow, I kind of like this class, then, well, you got to select the other one. Because if you wanted to play, let's say, the Assassin, right? Like, you're like, oh, I really love running dual blades. Well, you can't really do that with the Warrior, as far as the way that the Assassin is built with crit. Now, Guild Wars is a very unique game because you can have a primary class and a secondary class. The difference is that you get like some sort of main stat, like Assassin gets crit, so therefore if you want to run like dual blades and build into crit by getting extra energy, well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult on the Warrior because each class has its own primary stat point. So there's a lot actually to go ahead and actually explain, but basically you have your primary class, which you cannot change, but your secondary class can be changed in the game. But anyways, yeah, we have Prophecies, Factions. You guys can select whatever one that you want, or Nightfall if you only care about the first 5. But let's talk about the first 5 classes here, and then we'll kind of do it one step at a time, and I'll try to help you decide what's the best class for your playstyle. So as far as it goes, we have the Warrior. So starting right off, as far as the Warrior goes, I won't go too far into like showing you guys the customization, because the customization in Reforged, as far as I'm aware of, has not changed. It's basically the same exact game. But as far as it goes in terms of deciding which class can maybe be for you, we're gonna actually use 2 different websites here. So you can go to the Guild Wars Wiki or the Guild Wars PVX, which goes over all of the meta builds for the game, which I actually think is a good thing to check out. Now, it depends if you want to play PvE or PvP, but most of the PvP builds will work in PvE, but there are PvE specific skills that only work for PvE that are not available for PvP. So that's something that you're going to have to factor in as well. But I'll briefly go over kind of how the class plays, as well as maybe what can determine if you want to try out this class. So as far as the Warrior goes, it is a mainly oriented around a class where you are going to be using axes, hammers, swords, and there's also this thing called tactics over here, which is kind of like different things that are kind of unique, where it could be in an area where it's like healing, or there are other things that can give you damage and tactics as well, but it's usually like, think of tactics as the better word would be utility, that some enemies would be, let's say, adding a debuff or certain other things, like the different shouts. Usually those are related to tactics here. But as far as the Warrior goes, kind of looking at the skills, this can kind of help you determine maybe what you want to play. So if you like a melee-oriented class, this is like melee-oriented mostly. They have a special attribute called Strength, which gives you armor penetration, which will give you essentially more damage, because that's how you check the character's armor class to see how much damage you do. It's not like a miss system, but there is like blocking, and there's also other ways where you just don't take damage. But for the most part, you're not really missing unless there's a debuff on you or a buff on the enemy. But basically, this is a melee-oriented build. Now this over here, this little 5 icon, is going to be how much mana the skill costs. Most of the Warrior skills don't cost very much mana because they have a lot less mana like in their mana pool, and their regen is the slowest out of all the classes. However, they have something called adrenaline that has to build up. So as you hit stuff, this will ramp up. So this requires you to hit 6 times, but there are ways where you can increase the amount that you are able to build up. And some of the bigger skills that do more damage will give you more adrenaline. Some of the stuff will reduce all of your adrenaline, and some of the stuff can be a little bit different. There's a lot of like unique skills in Guild Wars because you're able to select 2 classes. Sometimes you can kind of do these really cool combos here. But as far as like the warrior goes, if you like to be in melee range, again, you could use axes or swords, and those kind of just deal like raw damage. It's nothing that I would consider like really unique. However, with the hammer, one thing that's more unique with the hammer is you get to knock enemies down. A knockdown is really massive in Guild Wars. It's one of the most strong and powerful things in PvE and PvP because a knockdown interrupts the enemy, and obviously if they're knocked down, they're not going to be able to attack you back. But it specifically interrupts, which is really, really nice to have. There's also some fun things for PvE. If you like to really go faster, something called Battle Rage, which makes it so you get to move faster and you gain double adrenaline from your attacks, which is really cool. Now, it does end if you use any non-adrenaline skills, so there's like that downside with some of the basically the ultimate skills over here. They have like these elite skills, and those are going to be determined by your class. Some of these are really cool, and these ones over here, do you see where it's like in the orange? This class over here, and just like all their other classes that we'll briefly talk about here, they're all going to have ultimates that are just available for their class. But as far as it goes, yeah, you can actually block, which means you just don't take any damage. But for the most part, I'm just going to kind of scroll down. But to kind of sum it up, it is a class that's mainly orienting itself around kind of rushing the enemy, and there's not really like any jump attacks. There's no jumping in the Guild Wars 1, by the way. Even in the Reforged, unfortunately, they didn't add it. Guild Wars 2 has jump, but basically there's also a lot of deep wounds that are inflicted by the axes. Swords tend to do a little bit more in the bleed department, as far as like kind of debuffs, but sometimes they can overlap. But as far as it goes, you want to like, if you're playing PvP, you want to jump on the casters and just keep on wailing at them. That's kind of how this is played. But basically, yeah, if you like to be in the thick of things and you also like to tank, this can actually be a pretty good tanky class because you can just start stacking lots of things that would give you armor, and their base class gives you more armor. But again, some of these skills that you may see may be specifically for PvP, and they may interact differently in PvP. The one thing I really like with the class, though, that can be applied to all classes is this thing called Frenzy. It does make you take double damage, but you get 33% attack speed, which is insane in Guild Wars 1. It's just really massive. This is probably one of the best things considering it lasts for 8 seconds and has a 4-second cooldown. So pretty much you can have 33% more attack speed. Now again, there's a double-edged sword with it, but for the most part, to not make this video super long, I won't go super far into it, but their healing skill is a signet, so it doesn't even require mana. You just have to cast it. It takes 2 seconds, and then you however many points into tactics is however many how much HP that you gain with it. So that when they have these numbers, it's depending on how much strength or swordsmanship or hammer mastery that you put in. You usually don't want to spec into, let's say, hammers and axes. You can do that, but it's kind of not really good because you only have so many skill points, and just like if you've ever played Diablo 2, going hybrid is a little bit more difficult to get really good value out of it. So kind of pick out if you want to run axes, if you want to run swords, that's going to be kind of your go-to over here. But yeah, I just want to go scroll down some of the skills just so you can see kind of what their skills look like. But it's mainly also just kind of showing you guys kind of like some of these skills, and basically it's just a lot of things just numericals in terms of like damage goes, but sometimes there's like some AoE here. But the main thing that I wanted to mention with this class, comparing it to the Dervish, which is the other melee class, is that for specifically PvE, Dervish is just dunking on the warrior, and the reason why I say that is because warrior by its base does not have cleave. There is some skills that can give you cleave, which means that like you can hit multiple enemies by one attack, which the scythe, which is what the Dervish uses. If you like melee classes, I'd still probably recommend the Dervish for PvE, but for PvP, warrior is actually really good. It's kind of a simple class, and well, if you just want to like, you know, not really maintain your mana and you just want to hit, okay, when the skill is up, push it. It's not really necessarily cooldown related, but it's adrenaline, so you have to hit the targets. But it is a pretty like easy class to get into some fun, and because you have extra armor, you have a little bit more survivability, unless you hit the frenzy button, which I'll be honest, most builds will be playing that. But yeah, really fun build for a beginner as well if you like to play up and close. Next up though, let's go over the Ranger, and this way you guys can kind of visually see the class as well, because sometimes I think people like to see kind of like the fantasy of the class in terms of like the way it kind of looks. So I want to go over the Ranger now, and keep in mind you could pick your main class and you also get a subclass. So the Ranger is all about using a bow for the most part, but you can play a hammer, so you can still play in a different way. But the way that this build was really good, it was popular at one point, it was one of the most meta builds, it was called a Thumper, and you would have a pet, and it's a shout, so it does buff yourself and your pet, and basically you're just going to get additional damage, and you also get regen. It's really, really strong, and I think this is the main reason why I would recommend this class if you kind of like the pet fantasy of having a main pet. There's also the Necromancer, which can summon a bunch of things, but for the most part this class is oriented around bows, so you get extra things where you can get extra damage. You can get choking gas, which can interrupt people. You can get burning arrow, which does burn damage, which is a damage over time. But the one thing that makes the class a little bit more unique is specifically the charm animal, so you can actually have a pet with you, which is pretty cool. And then in high level PvP, they're probably still one of the best for the GVG, which is the guild versus guild. There's something called a flag runner, and it's really hard to beat this class because they can cripple the other flag runner, and they also have a bunch of mobility. With certain things that would just give them increased movement speed, and then you're also again using crippling shot. So in terms of 1v1ing another player here, there are lots of different forms of PvP, but if you want one of the faster classes to get from point A to point B in specifically guild versus guild, and you also want to slow down the other player, crip shot is really hard to beat. But it's not a very easy class to play for PvP, because most people, unless you're playing guild versus guild, honestly, there's better options for their class. But it still is a really fun class to have a pet. But one of the unique things that you can do is they have a lot of traps. They also have these spirits that you can summon that can convert damage, or this makes it so people cannot revive. So for PvP, there are some really cool things that you can mess around with. You can also inflict bleed, poison, but the other thing that I feel is very unique to mention is they can be a trapper. So there's a lot of traps that you can play with this class as well, which means that you put down the trap, and then when they walk over it, they take damage. Now, this is not meta at all, but if you want to do some really fun cheese with a group of your buddies, there is a trapper PvP build where everyone of your entire team balls up and they play in a trap, and they move super slow. It's probably not going to be very easy to coordinate, but at one point it was a really fun thing to mess around with, where basically you would have a heal trap also, and you guys would just sit there and you would have this ball that was almost unkillable. It was really fun, but as far as it goes, it's pretty hard to coordinate because you have to time this healing is called healing spring, but basically you have to time all these things perfectly, and you basically set up a bunch of traps, and then once the enemy walks over them, since all the traps stack, they just get one shot. It's probably the most entertaining thing, but you can maybe mess around with it for PvE as well. But for PvE, I'm gonna be honest, there's just better options. However, the class is definitely a fun class to play. For PvE, I'm gonna be real, most people really don't care too much what you play. As long as you get 2 healers in the game, it's pretty smooth for the most part. However, there are certain areas where they're only going to be taking in certain classes, like the monk. If you want the class that's going to see the most play and across the entire game, everyone always wants monks. It's because they're the main support class. But every single class in Guild Wars, which is different than other MMOs, will have some way to actually heal themselves. So it's, even though the whole idea was that you had the ability to heal, you didn't have to play the Trinity. This class is definitely oriented around itself around DPS, just like the tank does do DPS as well, the warrior. But as far as this goes, this is your main healing skills called Troll Unguent over here, and basically it gives you some regen. But basically you can interrupt enemies, but there's a much better class, it's called the Mesmer, because the arrow has to connect. But they do have a few interrupting skills. Where is it? Let's see. There's there should be choking gas. Oh, there it is, choking gas. So it interrupts. I guess this one just interrupts spells. But there's a lot of interrupts in this build as well. You can be concussion shot. There's also disrupting accuracy. There's a lot of different things that can disrupt your enemies with this class as well. All right, so next up, I want to talk about the monk next. So let's go into the monk over here. I just realized this video is actually going to be quite long to kind of explain it, because there's just too much to explain to try to help you build the class. So you may spend hundreds of hours on or even thousands of hours, but there's a lot to go into. So monk is kind of your support class. It's the main support class, so it's all about healing in the game, and that's something called divine favor. So you basically just get additional healing. This is why this class is objectively seen as pretty much the best support or heal class. Now, you can play more obscure things in the game that can be considered support, but I'm gonna be real, everyone wants the monk. The reason why is they have some of the best stuff in the entire game over here. Aegis is really good. It actually got nerfed for PvP. They changed it so target party member can't be targeted by hostile spells. It used to just give, well, in PvE, it's like the most OP thing ever. So for up to like 11 seconds, depending on how many protection prayer points you put in, how it will work is all of your party members within earshot, so it's like a certain range, but basically have a 50% chance to just not take damage. It is so massive, and like if you have two people that have Aegis, which is a very normal thing that used to run in PvP before they nerfed it, you would chain Aegis, so you'd have this up pretty much the whole time, where enemies would just have a 50% chance to just miss with their attacks, which is pretty good. So it's your main like heal class, but there's also ways where you can deal damage with a bunch of the different things that would just do holy damage, and there is actually something called like Ray of Judgment, which is just all about DPS. There's also something called the 55 Monk, which is really good for PvE, unless they've like nerfed it since. But basically, with the Monk, your whole main goal is basically to heal your teammates. But there's other debuffs and other ways where you can actually heal them that it's a little bit more unique than just numerical stats. But like word of healing, if the target is below 50% HP, they actually get like doubled. So this is probably one of the more meta skills in the game, but you have to be able to maintain that like you see the enemies or your target, which is your allies' HP at a certain threshold, where you get to get like a big boost. Basically, if you want to play a support role, there's nothing else that I can recommend more than this class for actually supporting your teammates in terms of like healing. There's other support builds that can support your team to do more damage, like the Paragon, but we'll get into that later. But for the most part, this is like your generic support class. If you prefer the support playstyle and you want to get into the groups as fast as possible, this is 100% the most in-demand class across the board, because everything in the game does DPS. They can go DPS, and they actually can put a pretty good amount, but don't expect it to compete with, let's say, something like the Elementalist, which is the #1 class pretty much for PvE-oriented content in terms of like DPS output, because the AoE with basically a lot of the fire stuff is just like way too strong. Alright guys, next up, let's talk about the Necromancer. If you want the class fantasy of summoning a bunch of things, like they call it animate. So you're able to animate a bunch of the minions. So you can have bone minions, you can have a golem, you can have like these ranged minions called bone fiends. They also have a way to support. One of the best skills in the entire game is called Blood is Power for the Necromancer, which you're not going to unlock this till later. I'm just going to warn you guys as a heads up. The Necromancer isn't like bad early on. It's just that like until you get Blood is Power, it's really hard if you want to play them as a support. You can play support Necromancer, or if you want to play a minion build, it's really hard until you get Blood is Power and a lot of these other things to give your minions the ability to regenerate, because in the earlier stages of the game, how it works is that you have to heal your minions. They degen over time, and you're not going to be able to build that minion army earlier on. They are also a caster class. If you're just interested in maybe just playing them as a caster, you can do that too. But a lot of stuff has to do with specifically like stealing HP. There used to be an old build called like Vampiric Gaze and Vampiric. I think they have basically like overlap on some of the skills, but basically there's vampiric skills that can steal HP from enemies too. So they're like a caster too, and you can see like a lot of the skills can actually sacrifice HP, but one of the things that they get that's really good for PvE, because PvP, I mean, it can matter, but it's like, oh, that for some reason doesn't display it. But basically, there's a cooldown on it, but every single time an enemy dies, you get free mana. And it's actually pretty nice in the earlier stages of the game, because it's just extra mana regen, which is quite nice. But if you want a minion army, well, this is your best class, because there's not really a class. Even if you select Necromancer as a secondary class, you can't really get that many minions out there. It's just harder to maintain. It's just because that this skill in particular, Blood is Power, is just like so good that it's really hard to beat. And the thing that makes it so good is that it makes it so you just gain so much regen for your entire team. That's why you can support as the Necromancer, but it's just overall really, really, really awesome. And then you can also put Death Novas on your minions, and when they die, well, you get like a bonus, which is kind of cool. But yeah, minions, as far as this goes, you can play it as a caster, but for PvE, it's a minion based build. But there was another thing called Tainted Flesh that used to see a lot of played in PvP, which would enchant your teammates for a duration, and anyone that hits them becomes diseased, which is basically another degen, and you would degen the entire team, but then you would be immune to disease. It's kind of a cool build. But yeah, they had a lot of like steel HP, so if you're interested in that kind of playstyle, well, this could maybe be a class for you. But since I just noticed that this is already 20 minutes, what I want to do is also kind of give you guys a TLDR at this point. So, I will still go over all the classes, and I still think I recommend you guys to watch this video all the way through. The reason why is it's going to be a huge journey. Just watch this video and you'll get a better understanding of it, but I also understand that some people just are like, bro, just tell me which class I should play. So, if you like playing support, I still think that Monk is pretty much the only like main support healer sort of a class. Ritualist can support as well, but it does also do damage, and it's like a lot slower. Their like range is limited by where these spirits actually are, which are basically, think of it kind of like a minion that cannot move, it's chain it to the ground, as well as just the way that their skills interact. You can technically play Dervish as support as well, but the main class is 100% Monk / Mesmer. Like, it's like the most meta thing. But again, we're mainly going to focus on the main class, because your secondary class, you can change it whenever, so it's like not that big of a deal, as long as it's towards the end game. In the very beginning, you're not going to be able to swap a bunch of the secondary classes, but later you can swap it. It's not a big deal. But anyways, if you like a ranged play style, I would recommend the Ranger as well as the Paragon, although I would say the Paragon is definitely a class where I'd say it's my least recommended class. It's the least desired class, and it's probably the weakest class in the entire game in terms of like, in a group, do people want Paragons? There used to be a Paraway build where you would have like 4 or 5 Paragons, and you would chant chain, and you would basically have all these buffs up. It's really hard to coordinate, but with a good team, you could do a lot of cool, unique things in Guild Wars. But as far as it goes, I probably wouldn't really recommend these as much for PvP. Ranger could be played in guild versus guild, but there's just better options, and usually these are the least in demand. Like, people don't really want these classes in their group if they are doing some high forms of endgame content. However, with PvE, there's a lot of stuff where, like, as long as you just kind of exist, there's a lot of PvE-oriented skills that you can build your character to play, and you can all go what's called, like, Urson way, where you're all like these, like, bears. But for the most part, at least in the very beginning stages, I probably couldn't really recommend the Ranger, unless like you know what you're doing. The reason why I say that is because some groups may not want to invite you over, let's say, another support or like an Elementalist. Elementalists and Monks are the top 2 in-demand classes in basically all forms of content. Necromancer can be really good too. It just kind of takes a while to get to the point where they're actually really good. Again, Blood is Power, which is something we talked about. The Mesmer is a big interrupter, so these are kind of like your ranged classes. I mean, technically these are ranged like with projectiles that need to connect on most of the things, whereas these are just like your generic casters that can just cast and then just hit, versus like, oh, the terrain blocked it or whatever thing. Yeah. So basically these are like your spell casters versus like your other forms of range, so it kind of would separate these. So that will give you kind of an idea, maybe if that's your class fantasy. But now that I got that kind of out of the way, I want to continue going in depth, because I'm a huge nerd when it comes to Guild Wars, and I've been playing this game for thousands of hours. So I'll give you guys like the full rundown. Okay, so the next class that we're going to be talking about is the Mesmer. So the Mesmer class over here is going to be your main interrupter class. You can see kind of like they're like smirky looks on their faces. So how they play is all about casting faster. So their special thing that they get for their class is that you get to cast your skills faster, and they get to reduce the recharge time of your Mesmer skills by 3%. So it's really good per rank. So you can put in like 16 to 20 points in case you get like the bonus extra ranks of skill points. Basically, think of this whole class as a disruptor class. So what you're trying to do is usually like there's skills where you're disabling the enemy here. So if you like PvP, this is the best class, 100%. Like, without a doubt, if you're a really good player, this is without a doubt the best class in the game. There's nothing that can really stop this class other than another Mesmer. So how the class works is basically it's all about backfiring on your enemy. So like this skill over here, it's a hex spell that makes so whenever your foe casts a spell, they just take 140 damage, which is pretty massive in the game. You have about 500-ish HP, give or take. And so this is a big amount of damage that they take. And if someone's not paying attention, attention, they cast a couple skills, boom, they're dead. So this one's pretty good. It doesn't really see too much play, but there are certain skills in the build that are excellent. Like, for example, Chaos Storm, it deals damage, but it absorbs enemies' energy, so they just lose out on their mana, which is pretty big. And they have another enchant, which can last up to almost a minute. Every single person in your area, whenever you're casting spells, is going to give you an additional point of energy or mana. So they all have some like degens here, but basically the build is, in specifically PvP, this is a big one where there is a hex, which is a debuff. It says the target's foe's next skill takes almost another minute to recharge. And if maybe you hit their best skill, and remember, this is a 12-second recharge, and you can actually maybe get extra cooldown reduction, and you just start deleting their entire skill bar, right? And it's a pretty big thing to do. And they also have this thing called Echo, which is able to copy the next skill. So you can have like double diversion. So you can just like disable 2 of their skills for a minute, which is pretty much death for a lot of the support builds, especially if you hit 2 of their main skills that they need to spam to keep people alive. There's also this skill called Empathy, which makes it so in PvP, whenever they attack, they just take damage themselves. So they also have Energy Burn, Energy Drain, so they can delete the other person's mana, and they can delete their skill bar. It's probably the biggest nightmare for someone that's like going into PvP and they face off against a good Mesmer. A good Mesmer is 100% can carry games. I think this is probably the strongest class in the game, but it's not a very easy class to play. And the reason why is it's not just that, like, you know, you're taking their skills away, but there's a lot of skills that heavily benefit off of interrupting. So there's a lot of cast times where they're like 1/4 of a second. Like Leech Signet's pretty good. You can play this in every single class, by the way. If you have any open skill, Leech Signet is really good because it interrupts any actions. There are certain things that can interrupt, like a spell or something like that, but this interrupts anything, and then you actually stop their ability, and it's a Signet, so it doesn't cost any mana. It's 1/4 second cast time, and then on top of that, you gain energy if you interrupt something. But there's extra energy regeneration. But the thing that I really like them for, it was there's also a power block over here, so it's an elite spell, but it says if a target foe is casting a spell or chant, that skill and all of skills of the same attribute are disabled for up to 12 seconds, and it interrupts. Like, you can lock down a person pretty hard with this. So I would say if you really like to play PvP, this is going to be a hard build to play. Like, there's a hard class to play in general. But this one's another nasty one over here where it causes foes to take damage. So it says its end effect causes the amount of damage, and it says no effect and ends early if they use a skill. So you know how you can throw backfire on them, and then they're like, oh shoot, I don't want to cast a skill. But if they don't cast a skill, they take damage anyways with Watchful's Worry, which is on a 1-second cooldown. Like I said, it's kind of a more interesting class. I would say it's one of the most unique classes in the game, but again, you have to kind of interrupt, or you have to know the game a little bit before you can mess around with some of these stuffs that require interrupts. But there's also things like Illusionary Weapon, where you can make it so it does damage in place of another effect of a melee attack. You also get extra armor for each equipped illusion skill. So you can, like I said, this game isn't really locking you to like, oh, if this is a spellcaster, you can't play melee. You can get additional armor and you can play it melee. It's really cool with the way that Guild Wars is designed. But Mesmer, I'm going to say, it's a class for kind of the elite players, the players that really want to spend time in the game. That's where I would say this is the best class. If you prefer PvP and you really want to screw someone over and you want to make them rage, this is your class. Next up, we have one of my best recommendations, which is the Elementalist. This is your raw, I want to do damage. I am the most desired for PvE forms of content, but it's actually pretty good for PvP as well. What they get that's special is they have a lot of energy, so they're going to be casting a lot of stuff, which increases your maximum like resource. But all this stuff is kind of just based off of specifically doing elemental damage. You can enchant your weapons, and then you can get additional cold, fire, or lightning damage, which is pretty cool. Again, they're just all about AoE, throwing down giant circles of fire that spin around, or earthquakes. There's a lot of really cool things that this class gets. They also have just AoE that you'd see that's generic, that just kind of falls down from the sky. They can also get increased like movement speed that they can maintain, because this one actually lasts for quite a bit of time, and it does give you a pretty decent amount of movement speed. They also have a bunch of glyphs that can empower their next spell to get some sort of big bonus. One of the things that's like really fun with this class that like it feels crazy powerful is Meteor Shower, and then you can also like do it like a thing called Echo, which you can get as a Mesmer secondary. Meteor Shower is probably one of the most fun things that you can ever get. So you have Meteor, which shoots down like a meteor and then it knocks someone down. It's a really good skill, probably one of the best things in PvP. For PvE, it does what's called exhaustion, and that makes it so your energy can't regenerate like for that, like it takes away 10 of your energy. It's called overcast or exhaustion is what it's called. Does it change it in this? I guess like, okay, well anyways, overcast, exhaustion, basically what it does is makes it so you're kind of losing that energy for quite a big amount of time. However, Meteor Shower, it will exhaust you by 10, but it's so incredibly powerful because not only is it like just shooting meteors, but it just keeps on going down. For PvE, this thing feels so OP when you first try it. Now, it does have a long cooldown, to be fair, but it's like so incredibly good for certain like scenarios. I love it. It's great. It doesn't really see too much playing PvP because people will just interrupt you because it's a 5-second cast. Now, there are other ways where you can make your cast instant with a glyph. So a glyph again empowers your next spell. So there's one where it can recharge instantly, but there's also ones where it'll cast instantly. So Glyph of Sacrifice, your next spell casts instantly, but it takes 30 additional seconds to recharge. So there's a big downside to that thing, but they're fun to mess around with. Again, if you're just doing PvE content, a lot of stuff won't matter as much. I would really recommend looking at Fire specifically for PvE because everyone plays what's called the most popular thing in the entire game for a very long time. There's something called Searing Flames. So what it does is it hits foes next to the target as well. It does a bunch of damage if they are already burning, but if they're not burning, it implies the burning condition. A burning condition is a damage over time that does a lot of damage. But basically, you throw on Searing Flames, Searing Heat, Savannah Heat, and you can throw in whatever else. It really doesn't matter. These skills just dunk on the PvE portion of the game so hard. It's very smooth, or even like Firestorm in the earlier stages of the game, because some of these you may not get till later stages of the game. But if you like playing damage and you want to do it from like a spellcaster standpoint, this is 100% your class, and it is actually a very fun class to play as well. And again, the Guild Wars doesn't really lock you to any like very specific thing. You can even play with different enchants and just attack if you want to. Now, I probably would really want to recommend that as a build because they run light armor. Depending on the class you play, you may take more damage, but again, you could throw on Monk as a secondary and you can just heal yourself. It's not that bad. There's always also the Aura of Restoration. So this lasts 60 seconds and has a 20-second cooldown time. But basically, you get to heal for up to 500% of the energy cost each time you cast a spell. So you can keep on casting. Again, you could roll Mesmer for your secondary. This is a really good thing that I'm going to mention that's available for all of the classes called Channeling. So it lasts almost a minute and it's 15-second cooldown. It depends on how much points you put into it. But you gain 1 energy for each foe in the area whenever you cast a spell. So you can constantly just cast a bunch of spells and then you're going to get extra mana. Like again, if it only costs, let's say your skill is like 5 or 10 mana, if there's 10 enemies, boom, you just cost nothing, right? So it's kind of cool to mix it up. But yeah, I really think that this is going to be your absolute go-to if you just want raw damage numbers. And again, a lot of people like having elementals in the group because their raw AoE is just so fast. Like, while the Dervish can do pretty good damage and heal and pretty much do everything in the game, which is a highly recommended class, it has to get within melee range. This is just like all cast. You do want usually to have, ideally you can have someone be tanking for you guys, or you could just get a pet that's melee and just have the pet go in and be your tank for you, so to speak. But yeah, I think that Elementalist is probably one of my most recommended classes. Elementalist and Monk are like basically the 2 classes I would say that are always in demand and that people really like. But yeah, you can go into water, fire, earth, but I'm gonna be real, for most people it's pretty much always fire. Now, air isn't too bad. Air is the same as lightning. They have chain lightning. They have chain lightning, which can hit, and also it does armor penetration, so extra damage with that as well. But yeah, I would say look into fire specifically. Just look up Searing Flames. It's like a really popular build. If you go to any of the build websites, look at that one, and I think you'll have a really good time. But anyways, let's move on to the next class. All right, so if you want to select these other 4 classes, you can't select Prophecy. You actually have to select a different campaign, but you can actually select the Assassin here. So let's go ahead and go over the Assassin. But first, we'll show off what the Assassin actually like kind of looks like over here. So basically, think of like Naruto. You got like the headband over there, and then here's kind of like the overview of the character. And I like this class. It's a very combo-oriented class, so if you do not like combo-based classes, I would stay far away from this one. However, there are PvE versions of it where you just enchant your daggers with elemental like frost, fire, it doesn't really matter. You just attack and you just kind of go to town on the enemy. But mainly the way the class is designed is around getting critical strikes. And then it's specifically doing a lot of stuff that requires combos. One of the most fun builds, and I'll definitely upload gameplay of this class, it's called a Wastrel's Collapse Assassin. And so how it works is you teleport to the enemy. Let me show you kind of like, this is what I would consider like the bread and butter of the class, is the Wastrel's Collapse. It's probably one of the better builds to play for some forms of PvP. I say some form because if you're doing ones where enemies can be far away from each other, then this is excellent. But basically, you shadow step, which means you teleport towards the target. It knocks them down if they did they change it for PvP? Okay, so it's the target's knocked down if foe is not using a skill. So you have to make sure that they're not doing anything. It also used to make, okay, maybe they have updated it, but it used to also say that it's not around an enemy. But basically, you teleport towards them, it knocks them down. And then you would follow up with, let's say, like, I think it's called the Ox. If we can just type in Ox. Okay, it's Trampling Ox. So it's a dual attack, and it causes a knockdown. Oh, this is, okay, this is something of the Ox. Let me find the other if it's knocked down. So, like, the way that this class works is it needs to hit, let's see. I think it's this one over here. No effect. Okay, here we go. So we use the Wastrel's Collapse, which costs energy. Then you activate this, which then deals damage, and then you gain energy, and it says no effect unless the target foe is knocked down. And then once it's knocked down, then you would activate the other Ox skill, which I think we were looking at. Where is it? Or we can do, let's see, inflicts poison, no effect unless target is knocked down. So you can go knock the target down, then do Falling Spider, and then you can follow up with other things. So again, certain ones will have to require you to, it'll require you to do what's called a lead attack. And some of them, they'll have like a tag where it says lead attack. So again, this class is probably not the easiest to play. And the reason why is because it requires you to have very specific timings. Like this one over here, Horns of the Ox, it causes knockdown if the target foe is not adjacent to any allies. Okay, so this is the one I was using. So you can teleport towards them, use one ability, then knock them down. Like if you really want a 100 to 0 target, this is one of the classes that can do it. You can also technically do it with like Shock Warrior, but this is the class that can 100 to 0 relatively fast. Where your opponent, it will feel like they can't do anything, but honestly, you can do stuff. It depends on the build. Some builds, you might not be able to do anything, but it does require you to, again, consistently read the stuff. So I would say this is more of an advanced class, and it will take time to learn. But as far as it goes, there was also another build that you can play. If you want to play at range, you can play a Crit Barrage Assassin, which does use a bow, and you're just banking off all of these critical strikes, and then you could just keep on spamming things because you get energy once you actually do land a crit. And that's why you would play this as a ranged, like, bow character. Again, this game allows you to do pretty cool things. But yeah, I really like this class. It's fun, but I'm going to warn you guys, it is got a very, very steep learning curve. And people usually, for PvE, they don't want you. And for PvP, unless you're really, really good, I'll be honest, they're going to skip out on you. It's not a class that I could say sees a lot of play in general, especially in PvP. But hey, you know, you can try and go for it. I think the build is fun, but if you want like a very high skilled build that will see a little bit more play, I would look at the Mesmer if you really want to have like a high skill floor character. This has like probably the highest skill floor because there's too many conditions that like you may not have control over if the enemy's casting a skill or not. And you could see them like, oh, they're not casting a skill. But again, they might be tricking you and waiting for you to do something, because once they figure out what build you're playing, if they're a good player, they can play around it. So it's kind of like a more of a gimmicky way to play. However, the main issue that you'll have with this build, specifically in PvP, and what I want to mention real quick, is that like because everything has to work off of your lead attack, your offhand attack, and then you have to have like, oh, if the target is bleed, poison, they can cure these conditions. So like, don't think that you can play this class and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the enemy's dead. The issue is if step 1 fails, then you're useless for several seconds. So just keep that in mind if you do want to play this for PvP. Now, you can play the class another way, but I mean, the way the class is designed is not to just sit back anyways, because it's a very squishy class anyways. So, yeah, I would say I could not really recommend this class unless you like that certain playstyle. Like, you know, I would still probably recommend the Mesmer, but it does offer a playstyle that is very unique, and that's one thing I like with this game. Alright, next up, the Ritualist. This is a pretty unique class as well. So this class is all about using these spirits that are basically chained to the ground. So to kind of sum it up, they have something called spawning power. Oh, does it not, like, that's weird that it's like glitched. Okay, so let's see if, okay, here it is. So certain things that you create or animate have more health and more weapon spells. Now, as far as this goes, this could still be an okay class for PvP, but for PvE, the main issue that I would say that exists with this class is that you're spawning these like spirits that are chained to the ground, so they don't move. Think of like minions that are like burrowed into the ground. Is that like you need the enemies to kind of come towards you, or like the fight has to be in a certain range. If it's not, well, then your spirits, you're gonna throw them down, you're gonna kill enemies, and then you're gonna move forward, and then your spirits are gonna be so far behind. The cooldowns, they're not fast enough to where you can resum them on every single fight, and I think that's kind of the issue for PvE. I probably don't recommend this class overall for starters, because if you want like a good like support class, you probably should look at the Monk. This can be a good class, though. It's not terrible. There was something at one point called Spirit Way, which used to be one of the most popular classes. You'd summon so many of those things, and you'd have so many like pets, because you'd run Thumpers plus this, and it was like really good because you had just so many things coming out, and your enemies, like, well, they just didn't have really anything to focus because there was just so much to like attack. But basically, they can create these like urns. So like, oh man, this is kind of hard to explain. There are things that you can pick up. And there's also weapons that they can spawn on people. There used to be this weapon. Oh wait, this is just talking about the spawning power. Basically, they can have more HP. But there's a lot of things that they have. Let me go over some of the ones that we're like seeing play at one point. So this one's kind of cool. This creates a spirit, and every few seconds it just heals a non-spirit ally. So again, think of it kind of like pets that are not going to be moving with you. But they also have these like things where you can hold this item, and it says like you have 10 armor, and its drop effect is all party members get healed. So it's actually pretty nice. It heals everyone, but you can just run heal party and it just does it. Whereas this, you have to activate it. Your character takes a second to activate it, and then you have to push it again. So the actual cast time is maybe like 2 seconds, because you have to get this urn, and then you have like a drop effect. It's a clunky class to play. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. I probably don't recommend this class. But this is like an okay ability. For PvP, if you want to spend more time into this class, it probably could be okay. But this is just giving you like extra regen. Again, you would summon all these spirits, and the way that it works in PvP is that like it becomes okay because you have all of these like summons, and like your enemy has to like engage you on some sort of area that's a lot smaller, versus the PvE side of things. Well, I would say it's probably not as enjoyable, because the 45-second cooldown, well, you're going to go to an area, you may kill things in the 5-10 seconds, you move on, you kill another pack of enemies. It's kind of how usually games are in general. But this is a really cool, unique thing that they can do, is they can give someone a weapon spell. So what this does over here, and it has a 3-second cooldown, so it makes it so the next time an ally takes damage or life steals from a foe, it steals extra health, so it's extra damage, and then they also gain that HP, and then they lose a condition, which is basically like a debuff. So basically, this is a really, really awesome thing for PvP, because a lot of things like bleed or any like deep wounds, like these other conditions, basically debuffs to yourself, they get to heal, they get to do more damage, and it's a 3-second cooldown, it's 1 4-second activation, and 5 mana, which is pretty low. But think of this class as kind of like a weird like off support. That's like the best way to put it. I honestly probably don't recommend this until you kind of just get a feel for the game, but hey, if you like kind of weird obscure things, you can maybe try it out. But I promise you, especially for PvE, it's gonna feel rough. Next up, we have the Paragon. So this is in the Nightfall campaign to actually unlock this class and play it. But here's kind of what it looks like. They kind of remind me of Spartans. They got like a giant shield as well as a spear. So this class is all about chanting, and their special thing is that they are also able to build adrenaline, but they also gain extra energy for each ally affected by your shout and chant. So these classes, their main thing is that they're going to shout and buff your teammates. This could be damage or damage reduction, granting armor, letting their next attack look like a burn. Honestly, I really don't recommend this class because it's weird because it's orienting itself around like having heavier armor, and then on top of that, it's a tanky class, but it's ranged. But like, I just really don't recommend this class. It's kind of a weird support class. The reason why I just don't recommend it is because there's just other classes that do like the job better of sitting far back and just doing raw damage. I would say as far as I'm aware of, most of the time people really don't want this in a party because it's like low DPS, and then on top of that, yeah, the shouts can grant like your teammates more damage after their next attack, but why not just do the damage yourself? There was one point where you could run a full set of these, as in like you run like 6, it was called like Paraway, but I just don't recommend it. It's like you can run this chant where everyone gets to heal on their next skill, and like you would chain these things. It's really hard to run, but you could run like a little Spartan army and have your entire group with several of the Paragons, and then you just like basically target one thing, and then you all have to like basically time all these things so you keep on getting these heals in AoE. But it's kind of cool that you can do these really weird obscure things. They're called spike builds, by the way, if you want to look up. Like one of the most popular things in the game at one point was called blood spike, which you would all have to be, back in the day we used to use Ventrilo before like we had like Skype and Uvu and I don't know, Discord now, but basically you would target something, go 3, 2, 1, and then you would hit them with one very specific skill, and then you would back up, and then you keep on shouting to keep on buffing and keeping all your stuff up with a bunch of defenses. It's a class where I would say it's kind of weird because it's a buff class that requires some of the stuff is based off of adrenaline, which takes time to build, and then on top of that, if you would play a support class, you could just buff your team already via just like enchants with like, let's say, the Ritualist, or even other classes that can give your characters buffs like instantly, where like these need to be built up. It's kind of a really weird class, to be honest. I probably don't recommend it for most people. I don't feel like it really fits a role that other classes can't, because I feel like if tank, dervish, and the warrior were probably better like tank classes, although like you have some stuff where it probably will give you some defenses, but it's supposed to like support the entire party. Like you're constantly just shouting. When you're doing that, you're not doing damage. Depending on if it's a shout or a chant, some of them do have like certain activation times. You can see the activation times over here. Some of these are echoes, which will repeat. It's a hard class to play, so it's a renewal on chant or shout. So, again, this is kind of one of those complex classes, but that's kind of cool, though. I actually like that Guild Wars has these more unique things called chants versus shouts versus other things. Echo, shout, chant, there's just like several of these, but it's not like a terrible class. Like they have defensive anthem. Oh, is it PvP over here? Party members have a chance to block in when you hit with an attack, so you wouldn't attack until very specific intervals. Again, it's a really unique thing. If you want to try Paraway, I don't know if there's going to be even groups that like do these certain like weird things that were super meta back in the day, especially when the game first came out. When this class first came out, I remember this was very popular. You would chain these in Aegis chain, then it was like really hard to beat. You would have this like Spartan army that was just like you couldn't hit them because they wouldn't hit you until they would just one shot. They would target them and go 3, 2, 1, one shot, and then you just all activate whatever skill that is, the burst skill. Really, really cool. If you can ever do that again, it's a blast. All right, the next class that I can recommend over here. This one I can actually recommend is one of the greatest melee PvE healers. Dude, there's like nothing wrong with this class. Like I feel like this class is really cool. The reason why I like this class and why I'm going to recommend it is it's fun too. The reason why it's so fun is they have something called mysticism, which it reduces the cost of your Dervish enchantments by 4%, and in PvE you have +1 armor per rank of mysticism while you're enchanted, and enchant is basically a buff. So basically they are tanky because of this, and then they also have a lot of ways where they can heal themselves. But what's even cooler is all their ultimates or transformations, so you can become, I don't know if they're gonna have a picture of it, so you get to become, like your character can look like one thing, but then you could transform into another thing. They have all of these avatars that can give you all these different buffs and different things on your character. And I think this is one of the classes that I absolutely can recommend, because not only do you have all these things that you can transform into, is their base attack, like their just attack will cleave. So if there's a big group of enemies, you just hit all of them all in one swing. Whereas with the warrior, well, it doesn't matter. Even if they're really close, your attack just hits that one enemy. So it's really good for PvP and PvE, because PvP, if people know what they're doing, they're not going to stand next to you against a Dervish. But if it does work and you get like big AoE, like big spin attacks, oh man, it's like excellent. Plus, just in general, they have like good heals. They can actually heal. There's basically something that, oh man, let me find this one other skill and mention it. Here it is. This is one of like the ultimate skills, considering it has 1/4 second cast and it's only 10 seconds on cooldown. It heals for up to 50% of your current health onto another target. So you can't target yourself, obviously, but like it's basically there's a skill on the monk called Infuse, which like sacrifices your HP to give them HP, and it's like so fast because 1/4 second cast. This is like so massive to like just have on your bar. If you are doing PvP content or even PvE, I mean, you can just like save someone instantly. And again, they're tanky, they do damage, and they can transform, which is kind of cool. And speaking of transform, they can also gain adrenaline faster here, which is kind of cool. And this one on PvE makes you attack, move, and gain adrenaline fast like this. You can just keep up the whole time. It's a 10-second cooldown. It lasts for 15 seconds. So you get to move fast, attack faster, and you're getting more adrenaline. And it's basically 100% uptime. But then on top of that, they have like extra like regen and extra heals. I like this class a lot because with the warrior, like you have a lot less like uptime on a lot of the spells that you cast, especially if you want a secondary class that costs mana. This class is excellent because it feels really good to play because you have good AoE, you have good heals, you can kind of support your teammates. You can't really go full support, but that one skill alone makes it very, very big in the support category if you're just like instant one button like heal for a big amount. But overall, I like this class and I can really recommend this if you prefer a melee class that can also be a caster that has good AoE clear. But I'll be honest, this class doesn't see that much play compared to Ellie in terms of just like raw like AoE damage, but you definitely want someone to play melee. And the reason why you need someone to play melee, so honestly, invite a warrior, invite a dervish into the group, and the reason why is, or a thumper, which is like the ranger with a hammer. With the pet, is because you want the AoE to stick on the target, right? If you throw like a giant fire AoE, because Elementalist is a class I highly recommend, you need someone to sit there and tank the damage so the AI stands in the AoE, right? Unless you want to stand in it, which you can do. But there's a lot of really cool things with the avatar over here. Like I said, the avatar is so cool because you could attack faster, your attacks deal holy damage, you get to burn the enemies. With this one, whenever you use a dervish skill, you lose a hex, which is a debuff, and you get to heal. So like, there's avatars that give you more damage, you're burning everyone, or you can just apply a heal and then also remove any sort of debuffs. This one over here, you get to apply diseases to the enemies, and then Lissa over here, your Dervish entrance lasts longer, and you get to deal chaos damage, you get to steal energy. Like again, this is a completely different like thing that you get to like swap into. Like Melandra over here converts you into like this over here. Again, it's a completely new like form that does do different things. So like with this one, you get extra 150 plus max health and elemental armor, and you do earth damage, and you get to cure conditions from all party members whenever you lose a Dervish enchant. So like there's too much going for this class to say that I couldn't just recommend this class. And yeah, it's a class that I would say that later stages of the game, I'm gonna be real though, the main trinity over here, to kind of do a quick little recap because this video I know is really long. If you like to play a melee playstyle, I would recommend the warrior and the dervish. If you like to frontline, right? If you want to sit back and kind of be a caster, 100% elementalist, my #1 recommendation. There's not anything that even comes close. As far as like the one class I would probably not recommend though, just in general, is Paragon. But the Mesmer, if you want to be a high skill floor, like as in like if you're bad, you're gonna get 0 value. People are gonna be like, what the hell is your fault? The Mesmer can mess up pretty hard, but if you are a good Mesmer, it's great. Necromancer is more so controlling corpses, but you can also make a minion build. Minion builds, by the way, do not really work for PvP, just letting you guys know, because there's no corpses in the very beginning. Monk is pretty much your go-to, the best support in the game. Ranger, there are some niche areas for PvP, like the flag runner in Guild versus Guild, where you're basically crippling the enemy flag runner and you just run flag back and forth. That's kind of the role that you play with the Ranger, because their range is really good for being able to use crippling shot, whereas some of the other skills, depending on the bow that you use, also this is almost a topic for another video, but like the bows that you use do absolutely matter in the game. There's so many things that don't even get explained in the game, but we'll cover that in maybe another video when I go over a build guide. But I would say the main classes that I would recommend someone to play if they're just starting out: Warrior, Monk, Elementalist. That's my like highest recommendations, and start off with Prophecies. But I don't think Dervish is bad, but you're gonna have to start in Nightfall, which is kind of gonna expect you to know a little bit more about the game. But Prophecies, when you start out, it's like the brand new noob area that like everyone goes to, and you're gonna meet all the new players. They're gonna start off with this. So I would say, because I'm gonna encourage you guys as a brand new player to try out Prophecies. Warrior, Monk, and Ellie are like your absolute no-brainer go-tos. Those are the classes that I recommend. But if there's anything else that you guys felt like it was good to mention for newer players, hey, let me know down below. But if you are playing, let me know, guys, what class you plan to play at the start of the game. For me, I'm also going to be making a brand new character. I'll be doing probably like a walkthrough playthrough guide because I love Guild Wars 1. I'm so glad that we just got Guild Wars Reforged, which is going to add so many new players and stuff to the game. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up. If you guys are new here and you do want to see more videos in the future, hit subscribe, turn the bell, and you'll definitely see more. But take care, and I'll catch you gamers in the next video. Peace out.